wrong mic. There we go. Now the microphone's feeding through to the audience. And let me make sure that Mark can hear me through the correct microphone
Even
as
better.
even better.
Even better.
There we go. There we go. So now you guys can hear Mark Sisson. Now you guys can hear me. Welcome to the show. I'm here with the godfather of marksdailyapple.com, one of the probably most important paleo blogs that's been around for a while. Right, so back in 2009, 2010, I think is when I first came upon marksdailyapple.com. It's been a big inspiration, and I didn't even put it together until just a few years ago that Mark Sisson of the Primal Blueprint actually runs Mark's Daily Apple. And I really appreciate you coming on, Mark. I think the audience is going to quite enjoy this conversation. You are one of the examples of somebody who has aged very gracefully, and somebody who's been very fit over the years, both physically, but also mentally and emotionally, right? So I've taken a lot of inspiration from Mark over the years, and I greatly appreciate you coming on and talking to me, my friend. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Let's have a blast today.
Right on, man. Right on. So you're over on the East Coast of the U.S., correct?
I'm in Miami Beach right now. I'm looking out over a very beautiful Atlantic Ocean and a vast expanse of beach with nobody on it, and it's killing me.
I think we got a lot of people that can relate. I'm up in the mountains of Ecuador. I'm looking out over some beautiful mountains that are normally pretty quiet, and right down below we've got this town that's usually on Sundays and even Fridays and Saturdays, pretty bustling with local people doing business and whatnot. But now it's totally shut down. And again, I only go to town like once or twice a week normally. But this has been it's also been difficult on me and my family because I find myself just wanting to go to town more all of a sudden that I can't. It's kind of a funny situation. But yeah, so we got lockdowns, we got quarantines. I'm sure we can get into some of that later. But I want to kind of get into how you got all started with this. So I'm not even that familiar. I'm so familiar with what you've done over the last 10, 20 years with your businesses online. So familiar with a lot of the work that you've done lately. But how did you get started with this, and how did you start Mark's Daily Apple, which is one of the most influential blogs out there in this sphere?
Yeah, well, evolution has been a major theme in everything I've done and written about over the past 30 years. And evolution was really a process by which I came to this. I've always been interested in health and fitness, starting at a very early age, and I was very interested in running for some strange reason when I was a teen. So I spent my first several years as an athlete. I just literally kind of jogged to and from school just to save time and beat the bus. And by my freshman year in high school, I was too small to play football, basketball, baseball, or hockey. I grew up in Maine, and I went out for the track team, and I found that all this jogging to and from school had developed a level of fitness that I hadn't necessarily intended on. It was just just sort of a habit I had to just get to and from school quickly. But lo and behold, at the end of my freshman year in high school, I was the high point man on the track team. I would win the mile and the 2 mile, and of all things, once in a while, the pole vault. So I became a track man early on, and got interested in human performance from that level. Started reading a lot about what sort of diet would enhance my performance, what sort of steps I could take through the foods I was choosing to eat. Of course, in those days, pretty much all revolved around carbohydrates and how many grams of carbs you could slam down your gullet. So that kind of described the next 10 years of my life. I went on in college to become a decent cross-country runner. And then after college, I did road racing. I did 5Ks, 10Ks, marathons. I finished fifth in the U.S. National Championship in 1980 in the U.S. Marathon Championships. Went on to finish fourth at Ironman in Hawaii in 1982. But by then I was kind of falling apart from all the training I was doing. And it turns out falling apart from the food I was eating in order to do the training. So while I'd started out looking in terms of what I could do to enhance my performance and become a better athlete, the irony was that after 10 years of doing this, I was very fast in terms of my competition speeds, but I was falling apart on the inside. And I had all sorts of issues. I had irritable bowel syndrome. I had arthritis in my feet. I had tendonitis in my hips. I had upper respiratory tract infections multiple times a year. I had hemorrhoids. I had GERD. I mean, it was just, I was a wreck. And
Wow. Yeah.
didn't fit the picture. I mean, literally, I made the cover of Runner's World magazine 3 times as this sort of picture of a fit guy, who's out there doing it. And yet on the inside, I was falling apart, literally killing myself. So I retired from competition, high-level competition in 1982, and really set about to start to understand how the body works and how I could regain the fitness that I'd had, and more importantly, regain the health that I wanted all along, and to find if there was really a way that you could meld the two, that you could be fit and healthy at the same time. Because, so often in high-level sports, you sort of have to sacrifice health in the name of fitness at some point. Yeah. There's a point at which, at the highest level of elite sports, what you're doing is not healthy. It is stressful and demanding, and it takes a toll on the body, and it takes a toll on the psyche, and it maybe takes years off your life. People don't realize this. And so, I didn't like that concept, and I wanted to find a way to be strong and lean and fit and happy and healthy and productive without all that pain and suffering and sacrifice. So I called upon my college background in biology, with a specialty in evolution, to look at, ways in which we could harness the power of genetic expression. And this is right when that whole concept of we are not, genes are not our destiny, was starting to enter the lexicon back in the 70s and 80s. So I came into this at a point in time when the evolutionary biology was kind of meeting up with modern genetic science, and you'd see that there were a lot of things that happened in research studies that they would look at the outcome more in terms of what happened at the level of gene expression. Really, you could now start to understand that when you put in certain inputs into a study, that it would alter the outcome based on genetic expression within the organism or within the animal or within the human. So I love that concept, and wound up dedicating my life to discovering these hidden genetic switches that we all have, and trying to offer ways in which we can manifest a strong, lean, fit, happy, healthy body by the inputs, by the behaviors, by the foods we eat, the amount of sleep we get, the amount of sun exposure we get, the amount of play we engage in, the amount of touching that we engage in.
Whoa, hey there. You're going to get me in trouble with YouTube.
Used to engage in.
Excuse me, don't Fauci. I apologize, Dr. Fauci and Bill Gates. I'm sorry.
We'll get there later, but anyway. The initial idea here was to write books for athletes, and I wrote some of the original. I wrote the Runner's World Triathlon Training Book in 1981.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
A book called Training and Racing Duathlons, Biathlons, in the late 80s. And again, it looked at how we could harbor this unique ability, not unique, but this manifest ability that we have to alter gene expression through, in this case, it was the types of training that we chose to do, whether it was lifting weights or doing interval training or doing long distance training or maximum aerobic function, or all these little component parts that athletes need to put together to build a competition machine. And over time, it expanded into out of just dealing with athletes into the normal population. Like, how can I lose 20 extra pounds of body fat I have, or how can I get rid of my meds, or how can I sleep better at night and wake up feeling more refreshed? How can I have more energy? All these things that were sort of universal needs that people were describing to me, like, how do I do this? I've tried, I want to do it, but all the information I've had access to over the years seems to have been misleading or misguiding. So that really kind of got me started in the direction of writing. And then I'll keep going with the story if you have time.
Yeah, man. No, I'm fascinated. It's cool. So you're looking at it from the state of, like, rather than genetic determinism, where it's like your genes determine everything, and everything is determined by your genes, and this is how your body expresses itself, to looking at the environmental switches which are going to activate or deactivate genes, which I guess the concept is epigenetics, right? Was that a term back in the 80s, or did that come about later?
just beginning to be a term, epigenetics, and it turns out, there was this nature versus nurture discussion for ever since Darwin. Basically, is it the genes, the nature that determines how we ultimately the form we ultimately arrive at and how we behave, or is it nurture, the environment and the behaviors, or is it a combination of the two? And I've always been more in the field of interest of the nurture part of it. Like, how can I really take these? Like, I'll give you an example. If I went back and had done my genetic test back in the 60s, I would never have chosen to become a marathoner because I don't have the genetic makeup to do that.
But you were successful. I mean, you were super successful at what you did, and you made it work.
And so what I did was exactly I took a set of genetic, a recipe, if you will, and I created a strategy to maximize at the highest level what I could ultimately become in that within those guideposts, right? Yeah. So our familial genes give us a range of outcomes. So your dad might be 6'2" and your mom might be 5'10", and that doesn't mean you're going to be 6'2" or 6'3". It means you could be anywhere from 5'7" to 6'6", and a lot of these things have to do with what you eat, when you eat, the amount of stress you engage in, who you hang out with as a young child, and the social dynamics. I mean, so many of these things have an effect on how genes express themselves and at what time they express themselves. So I really loved that idea that everybody could have access to some of this information, and you could see that. Well, I mean, some of it was obvious. You go to the gym and you lift heavy weights, you get bigger muscles. You go to the track and you run longer distance, you get longer, more sinewy muscles.
Yeah, and a sore back and really sore hips.
Right, and a bad attitude, I may add. But but it doesn't mean that you're destined by the familial genes that you wound up with. It just means that there are different behaviors that you can engage in, different foods that you can eat, different types of activity, different types of movement that you could do they'll have the same effect on everybody. It's just the extent to which they have this effect that will vary from one individual to the other. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely right. I mean, it's like when you look at a bodybuilder and you're looking at, you got a big guy that's 6'6", that's real lanky with, very long muscle attachments, and that's going to be a different, have different possibilities for maximizing his muscularity within like the bodybuilding field, right? So there's certain epigenetic structures that will be better for that, epigenetic structures that'll be more optimized for running. But it's not like you can't be, a 5'5" dude with real broad shoulders and be an effective runner. You just might have to train differently, and you might have a different, ability to, do distance running.
Sure.
Or whatnot. Right,
but back to that 6'6" guy, the lanky guy, he's still going to put muscle on if he does the right amount of weight training. He's not going to maybe compete at a Schwarzenegger level, unless he does 200 times the recommended dosage of steroids too. But I mean, he'll still put on muscle, right? It's just the degree to which he does it that's based on the familial genes. Anyway, so I wanted to have this sort of template that I could create that would give everybody access to this information, and they could choose to use or not, based on the research I'd done, the research that I've pulled from a lot of other people. So at any rate, I was in this field of trying to enhance performance legally with athletes, and I started a supplement company. And the supplement company was originally intended to take advantage of what happens when you train hard and then you have this oxidative damage. So I created these antioxidant supplements. I created these things that would kind of maybe speed up your recovery, and I marketed them to athletes. And at the end of the day, I started putting them on a TV show. It was the early days of direct response television, right? Not quite infomercial, but somewhat like that. And lo and behold, the people who were buying my product were little old ladies who had read the anti-aging books and were thinking, these are the sorts of multivitamin, multimineral, antioxidant formulas that I need. And so I started selling a lot of these products to average citizens, most of whom were older, most of whom were not athletic. And I started thinking, well, that's really very interesting that the athletes, they're not really buying these products in the manner I thought they would. I think they feel like they're invincible and they're out training and that's enough and that's all they need to do. Meanwhile, these other people who are reading literature and trying to understand, how their bodies are aging, maybe not so well, are really interested in this concept. So I shifted into selling my supplements to the general population, general public. And this television show was doing great. And I grew up what I thought was a fairly large business back in the late in the 90s and then early 2000s. But in 2004, it just, for some reason, the model dried up. There were now not just, a couple of television stations. There were 300 stations. They were all cable stations.
Yeah.
The internet was starting to come on as a place that you could, an emporium where you could buy things. And so my business model ceased to exist. And
so was it a sudden thing, or was it kind of a slow decline?
It was really way sudden. It was like literally within a year or two, a number of things conspired against me, and I had this kind of scramble. And I use the term pivot. I had to pivot. So the first year, 2005, I thought, well, I got this. I won't do an infomercial. I'll do a TV show. I'll do an actual TV show. It'll be informative. It'll be really interesting. It was called Responsible Health. I shot 52 half-hour episodes.
Oh, wow. How long did it take you to shoot 52 episodes?
So I had a soundstage. I had a co-host. I had a writer and some scripts. I had guests, 2 guests every episode.
Wow.
It was a very well-produced show, and I shot 6 episodes a day. And then I would take a week off. So I rented a production studio at a PBS station in California at Golden West College. Yeah. And so I was able to get it on a day rate, right? So I think I spent like $8,000 for the day, which was a lot of money. But if I could shoot 6 shows, and I'd have a 3-camera shoot with a crew and a stage that I built and all this stuff. I was able to gang these productions together so that I could shoot 6, 7. I think one day we shot 8 episodes, but a day at a time. And then so I had this library of 52 half-hour episodes.
Did you have an editor? You obviously had somebody editing these.
Oh yeah. No, I had an editor, and the editor worked for me. He was one of the guys. I brought in my own producer. I brought in my own editor. So at the end of, I think I wound up spending on average about $3,500 per TV show, per half-hour TV show, which was, even in those days, in television production in Los Angeles, you would, like, the best bid I got was $35,000 per half-hour episode.
So you're looking at about 10% of the input you would have had.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
And they were good shows, and I mean, I showed them around. Mark Burnett, the guy who produced Survivor, and he's a friend of mine. I showed him the shows. He thought they were great. His whole thing is he only does salacious, so he wasn't interested. But anyway, I bought time on Travel Channel, and so I was on every morning at 8:30 before Travel Channel's regular programming started at 9, in 95 million homes. And you'd think, wow, that's a big distribution. I guarantee you, at any point in time, there were probably 1,300 people, 1,400 people watching the entire country. And the reason is, again, of anybody who's watching television at that time of day, which is probably only 20% of the population, 80% of them are watching CBS, NBC, ABC, and Fox, and then the 80% of the rest are watching, ESPN, HBO, whatever. By the time you got down to these little cobbled together stations, it wasn't that great a deal. So I lost, I think, $1.5 million that year that I couldn't afford to lose.
Yeah.
Not that anybody can afford to lose that, but I really couldn't. I had a wife and 2 kids.
Yeah.
And I thought, Jesus, I'm losing traction in my supplement business. The TV thing not only didn't work out, it cost me a ton of money. And I thought, well, I'll try my hand at this blogging thing. And this was 2006. So
this is it's not like normal soccer moms are blogging at this point. It's not like this is a hobby that a lot of people are doing. No one's thinking of blogging.
I actually thought I was late to the game in 2006. But,
wow. Yeah.
So much for that. So I started this silly little blog called Mark's Daily Apple in 2006. And I thought, well, I'm great at programming, if I do say so myself. I'm great at content. So I have no shortage of ideas to write about in terms of health and fitness and diet and exercise and medical things. And the internet seems to be free. It doesn't seem to cost much to produce whatever it is you're producing. And you don't even have to buy time, on a channel, although there are 250 million channels. So there's the challenge of getting eyeballs to come
Right.
to your channel. So I started it, and it got off to a very slow start. And I think at 1 year in, I had 1,000 regular subscribers, on a daily basis. And 2 years in, I had 2,500, and 3 years in, I had 10,000 a day. And that's how it really started to grow. And I developed this platform. And early on, I had people say, "Well, you're writing so much stuff. Can you put it all together in a book format?" So
That was strange. That wasn't the internet going out. That was my whole electricity system just surged, and I get the router reset or something. But we're back, and let's see. Sorry to everybody in the audience there. We were rudely interrupted by technological difficulty, but we're good.
Okay, so I think I was around. I was talking about having had people ask me if I wanted to write a book to put everything together.
Yeah.
So I wrote this book called The Primal Blueprint, and it was basically an encapsulation of all these different things I've been writing about over the years, even well before Mark's Daily Apple started. And the book took off. In fact, I spent a day or two at the #2 position on Amazon worldwide in all books sold, which was sort of kind of a major milestone for us there. And so between the Mark's Daily Apple and the book, and I started doing seminars, I started, getting more and more into experiences. We did a number of events called Primal Con. We'd have these 3-day experiences where you'd come to a resort with me and my team and a number of speakers, and we'd spend 3 days, learning Olympic lifts and throwing addles and having scavenger hunts and eating primal food. Nice. And doing cold plunges.
And this is probably before Paleo FX and a lot of these other things that you see now.
Oh, right? Yeah. So we did the events. I did a lot of seminars, and I was starting to I think develop a really close knit community of like-minded thinkers. And of course, from that sprang a lot of other paleo bloggers, people who thankfully I think took up the baton in many cases and said, I love where this is headed. I think this is the way that we all ought to be living. And so I want to get involved as a writer or as a, whatever, writing books or doing blogging or creating products. So I've been thrilled to watch that all grow. Around 2014, I realized that for the past 8 years, I've been writing a lot about food, all the things that are wrong with processed foods, how when you get rid of sugars and sweetened beverages and processed foods and grains and industrial seed oils, you come down to a fairly small list of foods that you can really, sink your teeth into, literally. And what makes the difference and what makes them a sustainable diet is how you prepare them, the methods of preparation, the sauces, the dressings, the toppings, the herbs, the spices, the seasonings. And so I realized no company was making ready-made sauces and condiments and things you could put on your food. I was writing about, how to make mayonnaise and how to make ketchup. But, I don't know that many people were kind of willing to do that. And
it's all seed oils, right? It's all the omega-6, refined seed oils, sunflower oil, all this crap.
Horrible choices. And, in the last 5 years, I've probably shifted my emphasis even more away from get rid of sugars to get rid of industrial seed oils. People, many in our community say, well, sugar's the devil and sugar is the worst thing you can eat. And I'm like, yeah, well, sugar's pretty bad, but I'm telling you, these seed oils are actually worse.
Well, it's funny when you say sugar, because what are you even talking about, right? Like, to me, okay, sure, high fructose corn syrup. Obviously, there's some issues there, right? White sugar, probably some issues there. But when you look at your body makes glucose, right? Your body does require some glucose, and you don't need to eat it exogenously. You can I've done a ketogenic diet since around end of 2013, beginning of 2014, off and on, and experimented with all different types of it. But I was also never sold on the idea that glucose is bad, sugar is inherently bad. I think you're onto something there with the seed oils definitely being terrible. But, my kids, they're eating fruit every day. I'm not going to put my kids on a full-on low-carbohydrate diet when they're growing.
No.
If I'm working with an athlete, I'm going to recommend that they're eating carbohydrates if they need to keep their calories up and if they're not, sedentary. But, I think you're onto something there with the seed oils rather than the sugar being the devil.
So I thought, in my infinite naivete and hubris, I'll make some of these products and I'll sell them in the marketplace. So
Yeah.
I literally set about to create a mayonnaise, a ketchup, a salad dressing, and some other a barbecue sauce in 2014 that I felt would fit the requirements of a food that I would put on my uh, prepared meals and do so with reckless abandon. In other words, I wouldn't have to use it sparingly because our whole lives we've been told, that mayonnaise tastes great, but you got to use it sparingly because it's horrible for you.
Yeah.
And in most cases, they were right. Or that ketchup has high fructose corn syrup, so don't do too much. Put a little bit on and add some flavor, but if you put too much on, it won't be that good for you. And the same with salad dressing. I mean, Oprah used to suggest that you take your fork and you go dip it over here in the salad dressing, and then go spear a piece of vegetable and eat it. I'm like, that's not how I do my salad.
The dressing's the only good thing on the salad.
Yeah, well, it's no, for sure.
As far as the
Agreed,
taste
100%.
goes, the mouthfeel and the taste.
As far as the taste goes, dressing is what makes salads palatable in my estimation. And if you're telling me I can't put much dressing on it because it's not that good for me, it's like I'm not interested in eating a salad. So I thought, well, how can I create a food that will encourage people to eat, more of these better for you food choices and do so in a way that makes it interesting and sustainable. And this really became the impetus for Primal Kitchen, for the Primal Kitchen food line. And the first thing we introduced was the mayonnaise, and we shipped our first jar in February of 2015.
Where'd you make it? Did you make it like did you have a small kitchen that you rented out, or how did you go about production?
No. So we've, as happens with most food, we found co-manufacturer.
Yeah.
We found a co-manufacturer who has a large plant who could do it to our specifications, clean the lines out after the last run of whatever they ran, and then introduce our pristine ingredients and run our batch and then clean that out and make the next batch, right? So, in fact, we had an early kind of hurdle was I asked the guy, what's the smallest amount of mayonnaise that we can run on this first batch? Because I don't know if this is going to sell. Jesus, it's $10 a jar for 12-ounce jar.
Yeah.
I don't know who's gonna spend that. I know I would, but I don't know how many people are like me. And my manufacturer, well, we can do 12,000 jars. I'm like, Jesus, 12,000 jars. Like that's this only has a 1-year shelf life. I'm not sure that I can afford that, but I just said, screw it, let's do it. And we sold out in 10 days. So I knew we were onto something.
And how did you market it at the time, right? It was 2014, 2015. Where did you go about selling it?
2015. So, because I had a platform, an online platform to sell my supplements, it was easy for me to just create a new product and ship very carefully with bubble wrap and everything else, ship directly to people's homes, this new mayonnaise. I also had very coincidentally and serendipitously been an early investor in Thrive Market.
Nice.
So I knew the guys at Thrive Market, and they were looking for a unique product that they could help drive membership by being the only people online, other than me, where you could buy the product. And so we sort of co-promoted each other for the first couple of years. They were like the largest seller of Primal Kitchen products in the world, and for many people, it was the only place you could get our Primal Kitchen products because we weren't yet in mainstream stores. The other thing that was very helpful for us was I was, because of my platform and because of Mark's Daily Apple and because of this community that I built, I had some, just coincidentally, some buyers at Whole Foods who knew who I was, who understood paleo, who wanted to have more paleo products in Whole Foods. And so they agreed to take the product, what we call off review. So normally when you have a new food product, you have to wait until the one day a year when the buyer for that category decides to look at all the new offerings in that category and decides yes or no on your product. And if he says no, you have to wait another year to try again. He says yes, or she, then it might be 6 months until they put them on the shelves. Yeah. In this case, I was lucky that many of the Whole Foods buyers were willing to just say, look, we got to get this in. We know the public wants this product. We know It's exactly what we've been looking for.
It's just
And so that
amazing that
gave us
nobody else did that. I mean, what a blessing that you were able to come in at the right time and, fill that niche when no one else was putting their foot into it.
timing is everything in, well, it's not everything. There's a lot of things in business
Yeah, yeah.
that are important, and timing is one of them, right? But
Yeah.
timing is huge in this case. And I think if I'd been 3 or 4 years earlier, this would not have worked. I don't think we would have had the traction that we had. And of course, if it had been any later, I think other people would have entered the marketplace. So timing was really, really good on that. I think to your point, like, how come no one thought of this? Even 2 years into this, we didn't think that we were going to play in the ketchup space. We'd had mayonnaise. We had 3 different flavors of mayonnaise. By then we had 12 different salad dressings, and we thought, well, ketchup is such a commoditized product, and somebody must be able to make an organic, unsweetened, great tasting ketchup. And we did a little bit of research, and no one had done it. No one
Yeah.
had solved for that huge mom problem, which is they don't
Yeah.
want their kids to be having the high fructose corn syrup that's ubiquitous in all ketchups. So that was the real eye opener for me. Was like, wait a minute, nobody has solved for this yet. I'm not going to say it's an easy solution, but we solved it within a month of R&D. We came up with a solution, and it won the major award at the biggest food show in the world a few months later. So it's been, for us, the real strategy is, what is it that people want to be putting on their food but are afraid to because the current iteration is not good for them? And then let's make it in a way that it becomes the best possible offering in that category. And that's worked very well for us.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch of people in the audience actually checking at the chat right now. There's a bunch of people who know exactly what you're talking about. They're talking about different ways that they use it. Someone say they got a problem there that the avocado oil does not emulsify for them to make mayo. So they're trying to make mayo with the Primal Kitchen avocado oil. You got any tips for that?
I will tell you that I get a great story about that. Avocado oil does not emulsify really well, and it's so a lot of these industrial seed oils that are used in typical mayonnaise, they do emulsify a lot better, and they're much easier to work with. And so we made our first batch of mayonnaise, and we crushed it. Like I said, we sold out. So we go to make our second batch of mayonnaise, and by the way, avocado oil costs 20 times as much as canola or safflower or corn oil. 20. So it's horribly expensive, and it's difficult to get, and you have to be very careful who you buy from. And I'm now the largest. The company is now the largest buyer of avocado oil in the world, I think.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
But the second time we went to make the mayonnaise at our manufacturer, it wouldn't emulsify, and we were like, wait a minute, that was, I think, $7,000 worth of ingredients that literally went down the drain. And they said, we don't know what's going on. We couldn't get it to emulsify like we did the first time, and something happened, and then we did it again, and another batch failed, and another $7,000. And I'm like, oh my God! So we were the most successful mayonnaise in the history of the world with our initial selling of 12,000 jars in 10 days, and now we're out of business. Are you fucking kidding me? So what it turned out was, for us, the secret was we have these pipes that fed the oil into the vats, and they had to be specially chilled. So they had to be at a very low temperature, otherwise we couldn't get it to emulsify. And that's so I guess what I tell your
you guys are going to have to rent his industrial kitchen if you want to make it.
Either that, or leave it in the refrigerator, before you try and make it next time. If you're taking it fresh out of the cupboard. On the other hand, you don't why are you making your own mayonnaise? That's what we do.
Yeah. So that's pretty amazing, man, that you guys are one of the biggest purchasers of avocado oil out there. I'm sure the space has been filled. I'm sure you got some competition now, since people saw how successful you were. And, it seems like it seems like a niche that you kind of spearheaded in certain ways. There's a big demand. You kind of pop the bubble and open it up for these other people to enter in, which is pretty awesome.
As we say in business, pretty much across the board, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so I really wanted, I want to be the leader in this category, but I am fine with having other people come in, because the more manufacturers that are creating better for you products, the more it drives prices down, the more it drives awareness up, the more people have better choices that they're making, and at the end of the day, the healthier they're going to be with, and their families are going to be.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of people right now, especially with all the lockdowns, with the difficulty to get good food in some places, you know, I mean, people are being restricted how much meat they can even buy in some areas. People are going to the stores and they're getting shamed about how many of this and that item they're buying. So I think it's a very strange time economically for a lot of people, for a lot of businesses out there. But you know, something that we've been talking about lately is just the importance of resilient food distribution networks, the importance of local food production. I know that you've been, you know, promoting grass-fed beef and things like this for a long time. What do you see going on right now with this economic situation, with all the lockdowns and everything? How do you think we can go about improving the distribution of food, right, in our local regions or even nationally? I guess most people are probably watching this from the U.S. What are your thoughts on this massive rising tide that we see now of people thinking about where their food comes from, and what are some of the solutions that we might have to these very, very pressing issues that we have of food distribution?
You know, it's most of what I think about our society today, I can't say, because I'm so disappointed in how we have.
Oh, you can say it here, but maybe on you might give me a kid talk YouTube. But.
Yeah, as a civilization, and you know this. The notion that we can make fake meat and feed the world is abhorrent to me. It is so antithetical to everything I stand for. I just, you know, I've been a contributor to Diana Rogers and Rob Wolf's, you know, new movie, Sacred Cow, which is coming out very soon, which looks at regenerative agriculture and what you do. And that's the only way we do this. The only way we feed this planet is by going back to the design that nature set in front of us. And we ought not to be thwarting. We ought to be embracing this design. And we ought to be grazing ruminant beasts, growing grass, creating topsoil, and doing it with small farms that are encouraged to participate locally. Without the huge regulatory issues that they have to face on a daily basis just to get a quality product to market. Now, you know, I understand the sanitation issues and the health departments that so many counties across the country have to use to maintain some level of sanitation. But this idea that that we can somehow mass produce fake meat and obviate the need to raise animals for our food is beyond ridiculous. So how do we solve it? I think we go back 100 years. We go back 75 years. We encourage if you want to call them boutique farms or local family farms.
Should we don't even look at that bootleg farms these days? That's like literally boutique and bootleg beef production is what it might have to go to right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, and if you follow, any of the work of Alan Savory, which I know you do, and these are the solutions that have been put forth. And, and we could have a whole discussion about, cow farts and methane, which is the most, again, a completely ridiculous non-issue, has nothing to do with anything. When done properly, growing ruminant beasts is basically a net carbon sink.
Yeah, absolutely. It's putting that carbon in the right place. Now they do all this moral calculus with you get these these companies that go in and they tell the average normie consumer, oh look, we've got this advanced AI algorithm, and it's basically the panspermia aliens beamed down this magical formula that we just tell you exactly what's morally right and how much carbon dioxide is released when we make our Beyond Burger, and it's all this totally pie in the sky nonsensical stuff, and these very abstract ideas that basically are about algorithms, right? They're algorithms. AI, as everybody's we're all being told that this AI is this amazing godlike being. Well, these are computer algorithms that are written by dorks like me. These are computer algorithms written by fallible human beings just like you and I. And these models are based on this, and we've been shown, especially with the current crisis now, just how dangerous having so much faith in these models can be, right? We put all our faith in these experts and these models, and suddenly it's like, oh, wait a minute, that model might have been incorrect, and it might be built on a faulty foundation. And that's what I see with the Beyond Burger and all this stuff with their calculus about carbon dioxide, which, we could get into that as well. I don't believe carbon dioxide is a toxin, right? That's what we exhale. Yeah, there's a carbon cycle.
It's one of the most important gases in our environment.
Right? If you don't have enough carbon dioxide.
And to vilify it is such a strange concept to me. It very much reminds me of the cholesterol idea, maybe 20, 30 years ago, where you take a molecule like cholesterol, it's one of the most important molecules in the human body. It is so critical to so many different functions of the human body. And then you vilify it by associating it somehow with heart disease, and then spend trillions of dollars to eliminate it in every human. Even though it's been proven that cholesterol is not a proximate cause of heart disease, it's oxidation and inflammation.
Yes.
And yet, we have this notion that my cholesterol is too high, and I have to take my statins, and I have to take this beautiful, wonderful, amazing, life-giving molecule and then get rid of it. Yeah. And that's sort of what we're doing with carbon dioxide. We're just saying carbon dioxide is one of the most important molecules to life. Without it, we don't have life. And to vilify it and then somehow tax it, it's just anyway. We'll have a conversation about that at length. Over a beer maybe.
Exactly.
A gluten-free beer.
There we go. But we could do so. We could come out of Ecuador. We can have some punta. Yeah. Show you what punta is. This is like the moonshine they make down here from sugarcane alcohol. It's like 300 proof.
Rum, yeah.
So yeah, the carbon dioxide thing, the cholesterol issue, a lot of these things. I mean, they're big ones to unpack. But I'm glad to hear that you've got a sane position on these things, because I mean, what we're seeing out there, we're seeing so much fear mongering about food, about the physiology of our body, demonizing of our exhalations, the classifying. Essentially, what I see it as is they're classifying our children as environmental toxins, which to me is inherently offensive. Right, to me is something that should be pushed against, and this is very unscientific in every way possible. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The regenerative model, that's the only way we're going to feed people so-called sustainably. And a lot of these terms are getting hijacked too. Sustainability is, if you go to Monsanto's website, they're the most sustainable company in the world. Cargill.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? All that stuff, very, very, very interesting subject. So the current food system that we see right now, obviously, there are a lot of issues. What do you think are some of the most offensive foods to our health that people are consuming regularly, right? I mean, you're a guy how old are you, Mark?
I'll be 67 in July.
All right, 67 years old. This dude, all right, you guys go check out his Instagram, go check out some of the photos of him recently. Dude does not look 67. As far as, when I'm 57 years old, I would be so grateful to be in as good of shape physically and then mentally as Mark. So as a 67-year-old dude who's thriving, who's obviously healthier than most 30-year-olds that I know, what are some of the principles that you think we in this world going crazy can use to maintain a healthy body and a healthy mind? And how have you implemented these in your life?
Well, again, my thought process has evolved over time, and I started out wanting to achieve health through good exercise regimens and the appropriate types of food. I didn't understand what the appropriate types of food were at the time. And by the way, nor did most of science. Certainly exercise science did not understand the appropriate types of food. That's why we have Gatorade. Most the U.S. Department of Agriculture didn't understand appropriate types of food. That's why 6 to 11 servings of grains was at the base of the food pyramid for so long. Still probably is. I don't pay attention anymore. It's why you were encouraged to give up your butter in favor of oleo and margarine and processed monstrosities. So my understanding of nutrition, like everything else that I look at through a lens of evolution, comes back to what the natural world not only intends for us to have, but what our genetic recipe expects from us, right? So our genes expect us to be eating quality animal protein and clean fats and even saturated fats and certain types of amounts of sugar that are bound up in a matrix of fiber, if you will. So there are certain things that I've done over the years that I kind of shifted my diet in ways that I wanted to experiment. So for me, Primal became this way to cut out processed food and to just eat, natural, healthy foods. And even in those days, I was getting 110, 150 grams of carbs a day, and it felt right. It felt good. And, then as I experimented over time and I became better at burning fat, and I realized I don't have to work out that much to keep lean. That was one of the great revelations. I used to think every calorie that you ate, you needed to go burn off doing something sweaty and hard.
Yeah.
And that turns out not to be the case. Hallelujah. And so I started experimenting with like keto for, this goes back 4 or 5 years. And all of a sudden the whole ketogenic diet became of great interest to me, and for a lot of reasons, but I'm just looking at performance and seeing how I can improve my own performance. And then I sort of almost shifted. I didn't shift away from keto, but I adjusted keto to what I call metabolic flexibility. So my goal in life as a coach, as an educator, is to teach this concept of metabolic flexibility to people. But by that I mean, we have this innate ability to extract energy from a number of different substrates. You can get energy from the fat on your plate of food. You can get energy from the fat stored on your hips, or your thighs, or your belly. You can get energy from the potatoes, the carbohydrate on your plate of food. You can get energy from the glucose in your bloodstream, the glycogen in your muscles. You can get energy from the ketones that are made when you withhold carbohydrates and you force your body to convert some fat into this magical fuel. And the truly metabolically flexible human has access to all these different substrates at different times. So it's not like you're pigeonholed as, well, I'm keto, and if I have more than 70 grams of carbs, I'll get kicked out of keto and I'll feel like shit for a week. No, you develop metabolic flexibility, which gives you leeway to eat some carbs some days, no carbs other days, one meal some days, no meals other days, 3 meals other days, and to go through life without having to think, oh my God, I've done it wrong, or I'm off I screwed up. I had a plan of action today and I didn't follow through. My goal is for everybody to be so metabolically flexible that you eat what feels right at the time. There's no guilt about it. If there is something that you regret eating in the moment, you go right back to where you were before. Nothing changes. You feel the same. And life is wonderful. So that has become kind of my magical overarching theme for not just myself at my age, but for what I teach and for everybody else. Now, what happens as a result of that is one of the first things you realize when you become metabolically flexible is you eat too much goddamn food. Like everybody eats, I think pretty much everybody in this country eats more than they need to, and in many cases more than they should.
Yeah.
And as I became metabolically flexible, I realized, Jesus, 3 meals a day, that's just too much food. I mean, that's just too much time, and I don't feel, I'm not hungry ever, whether I eat or not. So if I'm not hungry, why am I having breakfast in the morning if I wake up full of energy and I'm ready to go? Why am I even eating? So I did, I used to think about how human nature would compel us to overeat. We have access to a lot of food. We have access, there's food everywhere. It's all around us. And our brains, through evolution, are wired so that we overeat. And this is historically and evolutionarily a good thing. You overeat, and the calories that you don't need today, your body converts to fuel that you carry around with you on your hips and your thighs and your belly. And it's amazing because you can convert that fuel into energy later on if you don't have any food. The energy is deposited right over the center of gravity. So you don't even need to carry a backpack or 2 5-gallon buckets of fuel with you. It's an amazing system that we have that compels us to overeat, that we're wired to overeat. But the wiring happened over a 2 million year period, actually 100 million year period, where food was always scarce and you never knew when the next meal was going to come. And therefore you overate. It was just what you did. You overate as an organism, and you stored the excess as fat. And then when you didn't eat for 2 days or 3 days or 5 days, nothing bad happened. Your body went into this great, kind of closed loop system where it burned fat, created ketones, spared protein. It was a magical, wonderful system.
Yeah, even culturally, you have seasonally available foods. There's certain seasons when your great grandma's making pecan pie, right? But she's only got a little bit of pecans. It's not like she's got pecan pie throughout the whole year, right? So there's certain times where you're gonna have some foods available, and you want to store fat during certain times, and then you got times of famine where you're gonna be burning fat. So I mean, it's just environmentally the situation we have now. Just as far as even just looking back 60 years, 100 years, our grandparents, our great grandparents, they had a very, very different mind state about food. Before refrigeration came about, it was a very different situation. Your belly becomes your refrigerator in certain ways.
And yet there was very little obesity 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So, it was partly because there was still not that much food. It wasn't like it was available all the time. And partly because the food was actually from nature for the most part. And so you didn't have these Franken foods, these processed foods that convert to glucose immediately and then raise your insulin and get stored as fat, and all the story that goes along with that. So we were wired to overeat, and that was Rob Wolf's great book, and he really went into depth on that. And we recognize that, so we recognize that we're wired to overeat. But in the context of the environment today, where there's just so much damn food around everywhere you go, like my refrigerator is full of food, my pantry's full of food. There's a bodega like a minute away, it's full of food. There's 20 restaurants within a 3-minute walk of me, it's full of food. I could eat whenever the hell I want to. So that's not the issue anymore. The issue is, how do I eat good food and then satisfy myself so that I don't feel compelled to overeat and therefore, generate metabolic dysfunction and send myself down this horrible path of type 2 diabetes and obesity, metabolic syndrome, precancerous, atherogenic, so on and so forth. So I did a thought experiment a couple of years ago, and I said, well, so we're wired to overeat, and humans by nature will see what they can get away with. Like, people will generally say, what's the most amount of this meal I can eat and not feel stuffed? What's the most amount of this dessert I can have and not look like a glutton? What can I get away with here? And so how much can I eat? And I think it's inherent in all of us that we sort of have that tendency. My thought experiment was, what's the least amount of food I can eat and still have all the energy I want, still maintain or put on muscle, never get sick, and most importantly, not be hungry, because hunger ruins everything. If I get hungry, then I've screwed it up. But what's the least amount of food I can eat and check off all those boxes? And it turns out it's 30, 40% fewer calories than even I, at the age, in my 60s or late 50s, thought I needed to sustain, right? It's such a small amount of food. I thought, shit, we can feed the world if we just stop being so gluttonous and start sort of orienting toward local production, growing of vegetables and fruits and pork and chickens and, sheep and goats and cows.
You know what? We might have that problem solved for us now, as everybody is forced into bread lines and rationing by the whole economy getting shut down. So, we've got here in Ecuador, we've got 2 p.m. curfew, which is really going to help people not be able to eat. You've got the cities are completely locked down. No commerce is being done. So, I mean, it might sound bleak. I might sound annoyed because I am fucking annoyed.
Yeah.
It is pretty fucking bleak over here right now. And unfortunately, I think we're all going to be having to really deal with possible food shortages in the near future. I really hope not. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope we can avert this. But it does look like, at least here, commerce is stopped, imports, exports are stopped, people are freaked out, and of course, the government, big corporations are thriving, right? Because the essentials have continued to flourish. But yeah, the amount we eat. How much do you think the amount we eat is really influenced by the types of food we eat, right? So it's like we've got all these seed oils that kind of make us insulin resistant, makes us kind of want to eat more. Seed oils mixed with the sugars and stuff like that. It seems like without these, most cultures that don't have these introduced don't really have as many issues with crazy gluttony and obesity, right? Like even Weston Price was looking at many cultures that had a lot of food, but they still weren't obese.
Right. Yeah. No. It's in large part the type of food that we eat, because some of them, again, are engineered crunchy, salty, fatty, sweet to appeal to our taste buds and compel us to want to buy more and eat more. The famous Lay's potato chip commercial going back, 60 years. Nobody can eat just one, right? That was the whole point to that was, what is a serving of potato chips? Is it a 1 ounce bag? Or is it a 16-ounce bag? Because I've seen people sit with a 16-ounce bag, but an 8-ounce bag, and chow down the whole thing. It's a serving, right?
Yeah, the Snickers bar will tell you it's like one bar is like 4 servings. It's like, yeah, bullshit.
Yeah, right.
If 4 bars is 1 serving for me.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's really what they want you to be doing. So, I was thinking last night. We've been binge watching television and catching up on a lot of shows here because we're on lockdown in Miami Beach. Did you see that meme? There's a meme on Instagram last week, and it said, "I finished Netflix today."
I finished decade 1 of Netflix.
I finished Netflix today. Anyway, but I literally last night I had a pan-fried grass-fed steak, steamed broccoli with butter and some sea salt on it, and a glass of wine. And I was the happiest. That's the best meal I've had in like months. Because in Miami, I go out a lot. And I thought to myself, this is me in the absence of a dining experience with hundreds of people around me, clinking their glasses and enjoying whatever, and looking at a menu and deciding what I'm going to order. This is me getting down to the basics of what satisfies me and my taste buds the most. And it was incredible to just kind of go, Jesus, I mean, I could eat this, I could have this, every night for the next, 2 weeks and be not just satisfied, but happy as I could ever be with my food choices.
Yeah, but in similar situations, we've had, the normal steaks that I used to get them from about 40 kilometers away, and now we don't have access to the roads, and it's kind of a Mad Max slow, controlled demolition of the South American economy right now going on. So we can't get our steaks. So I get ground brisket from our butcher locally, and it's so good, man. I mean, I'm just having burgers every day, a couple times a day, sometimes once a day, and have some raw milk yogurt or maybe some raw milk from the cow. And it's like, it's basic, man. It's super simple. Basically, all animal foods and a little bit of honey thrown in here and there, or maybe a banana if I want it every now and then. And, it's satisfying, man. I'm just plain burgers with some salt every day, and they're fine for me.
Amen.
I feel good.
Yep.
So speaking of animal foods and kind of like the type of foods that we eat, I know every once in a while I see your name pop up in the Instagram feed there, see you throwing some likes our way. So I know you kind of see the types of foods that we're eating over here, kind of on a primarily carnivorous diet. What do you think about this whole carnivore thing, right? So you've seen so many incarnations of low carbohydrate diets, primal diets, the ketogenic diet. I mean, you've experimented with all these things, integrated them all into your toolbox. I mean, much like we do here, when I do coaching, it's a pragmatic approach to what works in your context, right? So what do you think about the context of like an all animal foods diet? And have you messed around much with like a carnivorous approach since all these crazies like me and Sean Baker and some of these people have been out there talking about it?
Saladino, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting concept. I love meat. I'm happiest when I'm having 2 servings a day. Um, I think that the concept works largely because of what you're not eating. I think that, in fact, I think all sort of ways of eating that claim to have benefits for health work largely because of what they're eliminating from the diet, not what they're choosing to eat. I think, you know, I think in Saladino's case, he's really onto something with, it's sort of the assumption that we've had all along that these phytonutrients are supposed to be good for us, right? These polyphenols and these antioxidants, we've assumed that they're good for us because it seems that they have antioxidant qualities to them or mild hormetic exposure to certain things. But the idea, it's a very interesting idea. And I'm watching everybody doing it. I'm personally, I like too many different types of foods. So when I say last night, like I had this steak and broccoli, I enjoyed the hell out of the broccoli. I got to tell you.
Yeah. My kids love broccoli. I just, for some
I love
reason,
the steak and I like the broccoli, and I feel like I don't need to give it up, and I don't feel like I'm having anything deleterious done to me through the eating of broccoli or the eating of a salad. Now, truth be told, I am known for the big ass salad, right? That's a lot of people will say, "Oh, hey, Mark, I've been following you for 15 years. I have a big ass salad every day, just like you."
Yeah, and well, you got the salad dressings too, right? You got a cupboard full of them salad dressings. So
I don't do a big ass salad that often anymore. Now, like today, and I'm talking about again the sort of the more pared down version of my eating strategy. Got up at 7 this morning, had a cup of coffee. First thing I had today was I had literally a can of tuna fish at like 1:30.
Nice.
And then I won't eat again until probably 7:30 tonight. And the way it looks, I'll probably have another steak because I have 10 of those babies in the refrigerator, and they're damn good.
You're like an accidental carnivore today.
Sort of. And so I have days when all I eat is meat. And I feel great on those days. Don't get me wrong. I feel maybe the best on those days. I'm waiting to see how sustainable it is. And again, I don't think Sean so much into Baker is so much into the nose to tail as Paul is. But Paul, I think the concept of nose to tail is a great concept. And I think that's probably the best way to engage in your own carnivore experiment if it's going to last longer than, say, 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, I don't get how people just do salted meat and salt. Like, to me, that's kind of, I don't know. It's just it's kind of dumb to me. I love Sean Baker, and I think it's cool that he can perform so well. And hey, if you want to do it, it's all good. But it's like, I'm not gonna spend that much money on just steaks when I can get, things like kidney. It's funny, the priorities that you see in other places where people have local butcher setups and where you don't have a lot of the regulations. Like in the U.S., everything has to go through these USDA slaughterhouses, and you've got, the factory farming system really benefits and thrives off of that setup because local producers can't just slaughter their own animal and then send it across state lines to other people. Here, it's like we go to our local butcher and they slaughter an animal a week. And I'm always telling them, hey, I want the testicles and I want the kidneys, and save those for me, and I'll pick them up on whatever day I can come through. So, and those go first, right? The liver is prime real estate. The kidneys are sold right away after it's butchered. In the States, people are afraid to touch these things, and it's more of a cultural thing. They haven't tried these foods. So, when I talk about like a more carnivorous approach, like I said, like today I had yogurt cheese with like salt on it on top of brisket burgers and a patty of liver that was ground up and cooked. So it's like a very affordable way of doing it. And then I'm getting loads of more nutrients than if I was just having steak, and I get the variety. So then I also do like yogurt and honey and stuff like that. And so it's not like a dogmatic thing. It's kind of it's a flexible thing. But I think for me, where I'm kind of, the way I teach people is if you make 80% of your diet good quality animal foods, that other 20% matters that much less. And I think it's really similar to what you've taught over the years.
Agreed. And I think, what it has also done is opened up a discussion on the necessity of fiber, for instance. What is fecal matter? Is it supposed to be lots of fiber that scrub your intestines clean on its way out to being undigested? No, I think fecal matter, it could be, by the way, and it is for a lot of people, especially vegans. But I think fecal matter, is supposed to be just bacterial turnover, just normal bacterial turnover, which happens regardless of what you put in your gut, and it doesn't require that you eat psyllium husks or indigestible fiber sources and things like that. That's been part of this interesting discussion that a lot of people who go carnivore actually have better bowel movements than when they were, vegetarian, vegan, or whatever. Yeah, same here. So that's been an interesting part of this conversation. And again, back to the idea that somehow we're missing micronutrients because we're only eating meat. I would argue that if we went back and looked at the U.S. Department of Agriculture numbers from the 1940s when they first did the RDAs, or the RDIs, or the DVs, or whatever they call them now.
Yeah.
It was based on a diet that was largely 6 to 11 servings of grain a day, which was horrible on the body. That amount of grain, the phytates, and all of the anti-nutrients that are in grains, not to mention gluten and all of the tightly woven proteins, probably had an effect of requiring a higher input of micronutrition than if you got rid of the grains and just kind of got the system in a way that it worked, again, as I like to say, almost as a closed loop. It doesn't need that much outside exogenous input for vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and things like that. If you've gotten rid of the inflammatory components, if you've gotten rid of the things that are causing maybe leaky gut syndrome, that are amping up the immune system, and all the things that can happen to most people who consume a largely grain-based diet.
Yeah, well said. I don't know. What about the place of carbohydrates with you now, right? Like I know you've experimented with keto over the last few years, and you put out a book about keto, right? Did you publish a
Yeah, I have
keto?
two. I have several. I have the Keto Reset Diet, which is a New York Times bestseller. I now have a book called Keto for Life. And again, the theme of these books is not to spend your life in ketosis. The theme is basically to use a keto eating strategy for short periods of time to develop this metabolic flexibility, which then allows you to go back and eat carbs and not have to adhere to a strict ketogenic daily regimen. But it gives you the flexibility to have 175 grams of carbs some days, 320 some days, 0 some days, one meal some days, no meals some days. And the point being, from one of those days to the next, you don't know there's no difference in how you feel. There's no difference in your energy level. There's no difference in your strength or your output, because you are so flexible. You're deriving energy from whatever substrate happens to be available.
And what type of carbohydrates do you like? I mean, you've dialed your thing in for a while now, and you're very in tune with your body. Obviously, I mean, as a 66-year-old dude, you look better than most guys in their early 20s. And what kind of carbs do you find work for you, and how do you use them?
So I don't do a lot of carbs, and I'm sort of choosing my meals based on protein first, and fat second, and carbs third. So I always keep, for instance, raspberries in my refrigerator. The raspberries would be my favorite kind of go-to treat, and I will put those on the most amazing full-fat Greek yogurt you ever tasted that
There
I
we
get
go.
from a shop down the street. And that's a huge treat for me, right? That's like better than in any Ben and Jerry's ice cream ever put out. I eat blueberries once in a while. I don't do a lot of, I don't do bread. I do a bite of bread every once in a while. I don't do pieces of bread. I do a bite of bread, mostly slathered with a piece of butter that's bigger than the bite of bread.
It's like rice. Like rice isn't any good without a bunch of butter on it.
Rice isn't any good anyway, but don't get me started on that. No, white rice is like, again, talk about a sustenance food for a starving society. And here Bill Gates is shipping millions of tons of it across, around the world.
Oh, but it's nutrient fortified. If we could just give this to all the third world, they'll stop breeding.
Yeah, vitamin D. Yeah.
Yeah. The vitamin A
So
rice,
yeah,
it's crazy. You know, he's actually partnered with the richest man in Africa. I forget what the guy's name is. Danoti Group, and this guy is the soft drink and refined sugar and alcohol producer in all of Africa. That's Bill Gates' biggest business partner over there in Africa. So it's
yeah.
yeah,
I
pretty.
mean, God bless them for trying to save lives, but I think you just obviate, you just create, it's like whack-a-mole or squeezing a balloon. You push the problem further on down the road when you do that. You just create other problems downstream. So
So fruits, and
yeah,
you're mentioning those fruits
some
are
fruit.
barely any carbs in those. What about things like
No, I
more
know.
sugary, like bananas or anything like that? You ever get the
No,
more sugary stuff?
don't like bananas. Don't like. I mean, I do like, like I say, vegetables. So, but I mean, again, like I probably had 5 cups of broccoli last night. There's probably 6 net grams of carbs in that, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
You notice a
uh,
difference in digestion if you don't mind talking about the digestion from that, because I noticed that without greens, digestion is so much better. I never get problems.
yeah, I don't. Agreed. I don't need greens for digestion. I just need greens because I like the crunchiness of them. Like undercooked broccoli with butter on it. I'm just saying, it's like
It's got that nice
it's a
wateriness and the
it's
crunchiness.
a it's yeah, it's
Yeah.
a mouthfeel that you don't get from meat. And I'm really, I mean, people know me for this particular statement. I don't put a bite of food in my mouth that doesn't taste fabulous, right? So I choose the stuff that I want to eat because I want to eat it. I avoid crap to the extent that I can, but I don't eat something, say, just because it's supposed to be good for me. I don't choke it down. So I look for things like that. So I have cheese and crackers once in a while. So I have like what I would say grain-free crackers, keto crackers or paleo crackers or things like that. So I don't really eat a lot of carbs on a daily basis anyway. Not because I'm trying not to, but because the kinds of things that I want to eat, meat, cheese, some yogurt, little bit of fruit here and there, maybe, and again, some vegetable, the occasional vegetable now, and I'm good to go, pal. I'm like,
Nice.
this is all I need. I've got, like you would say, my digestion was horrible from the age of 14 to 47. I had the worst IBS. I couldn't have made it through this interview
Oh, I know
without
the
having to
feeling
take.
when you're mapping out the territory. You're like, shoot, I hope there's enough toilet paper. I hope it's not already blown up and gross in that toilet if I gotta go. Yeah, yeah, it's not fun, and it's
No,
embarrassing sometimes, right? It's like
yeah,
I gotta go to the bathroom. It's
yeah,
doesn't feel
no, and that
good.
was my life. That was my life from 14 to 47, and even after I got rid of grains for the next 10 years, it got a lot better. It got 90% better, but it wasn't 100%. I think a couple of things that I did to improve it. Number one, I started supplementing with collagen. So I think collagen is an integral part, not only of the lining of the gut, but it also now turns out collagen serves as a substrate that bacteria in your gut can use to create butyric acid, butyrate. So whereas we thought that you needed fiber for that, turns out you don't now. And so I feel like I have happy, gut cells. So that was sort of a major part of it. And then I really do think that cutting back on the amount of vegetables has helped my digestion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wouldn't have expected that, right? So it's like I first started getting interested in this
Yep.
stuff, and it's like, all right, cool. Paleo kind of said back in the day, right, 2010 or so, the paleo concept was like lots of vegetables and stuff, but good quality meat, and the vegetables are going to be a majority of the plate. It doesn't mean they're a
Yep.
majority of the calories; they're a majority of the plate. But just it did take a while to slide into the just the experiential nature of what I do now, but really became so focused on animal foods and not avoiding carbs like the plague, not avoiding fiber like the plague, but I find that the less, the better. But then every once in a while, it
Yeah.
comes a
Not
time.
seeking it out. Right.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, oh, I feel like a banana, and that's going to help me. Every once in a while, it comes into play. And even things like clay, I think, have their place for health and for digestion. Like you start getting a sour stomach, I'll do some bentonite clay, something like
Yeah.
that. I find that is kind of nice every once in a while. But it sounds like it didn't take me 67 years to get there, thank God. But it sounds like we're kind of at a similar place in how we eat
Yep.
and how we
Yep.
enjoy food.
Yep.
Cool, man. Well, let's. I got one more topic to hit on today. I want to know what you think about all the lockdowns. You're on lockdown. You're over there on the east coast of the U.S. I'm over here in Ecuador. How are you experiencing this, and what are your thoughts on some of these things that we're doing as far as social distancing and locking down people in response to virus outbreaks and whatnot? How are you experiencing this, and what do you think the
Well,
effect of this is going to be?
how I'm experiencing it is with a humongous amount of frustration, because I think, it's probably very politically incorrect for me to say what I'm going to say, but I just think that this has been handled. This is probably the greatest mismanagement of a crisis worldwide in the history of mankind. And I feel pretty strongly that we're in for a world of hurt economically over the next decade, because of what we've been going through. I think there are, I realize there are a lot of at-risk people who cannot afford to get this coronavirus, and I feel for them. It's not something that I think, however, requires a complete lockdown of everybody. I think there was a way to go about this that could have flattened the curve without flattening the economy. And I think we're in the first inning of a long game right now. So I'll reserve judgment, I guess, for now and sit back and watch, only because there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
But I do not think it's been managed well at all. I think that you talked about models in the first part of the show. I think the models have been horrible. And whenever an economist looks at models, you got to step back and go, that guy, he's doing a Monte Carlo simulation that runs like a million different possibilities, and then spreads the potential outcomes out. I look at models of global warming and climate change, and I want to throw up at how bad these models are, and how we are relying on these models to dictate public policy for the next several decades.
Not just public policy, but I mean, this is like life and death. When you're looking at economics in the third world, when you're looking at a country like India doing a full shutdown for 24 hours for 21 days, I mean, to me, it's like, this isn't just negligence. This is like criminal level authoritarianism. And I am very much with you there. I'm not just frustrated. I'm pretty pissed.
Well, and again, I'm not claiming to have the answer, but I think there are ways to have done this and recognize that, every year in this country, 1.6 million people die from heart disease, lung cancer, failure, organ failure. There are a lot of ways that people, are going to die anyway. It's a predictable number. They're going to die regardless of the coronavirus or not. And I just, wonder how many of the current losses worldwide are a result of, very old, very infirm people who've contracted this. And again, it's horrible if that's a family member of yours, and it's at the end of the day, we need to talk about what our world looks like in a year, 2 years, 5 years, and what sort of things we need to do. Like, my focus for the next year is going to be, I'm going to talk to people about immune health. Like, this is my new thing. Like, how do I establish immune health? And I'm telling you, metabolic flexibility is a major part of establishing immune health.
What are the comorbidities that we're seeing that are highly associated with poor outcomes? You're looking at type 2 diabetes, obesity, hypertension, everything you've been teaching people how to avoid.
Yeah. So, again, very highly politically charged question. I'm frustrated sitting here. I feel like I have some answers. Again, the modeling is bored. Like when Neil Ferguson comes out and says there'll be 500,000 Britons who die of this, and then says, "Oop, my bad. It's 20,000." And I changed my mind. I'm in Miami Beach, and we had a hurricane last year, Dorian, that was supposed to hit the East Coast with a Cat 5 ferocity. And for 7 days, every day for 7 days before this hurricane was supposed to hit, there were models from the world, from NATO, from NASA, from European Institute of Weather, and every single model, when you overlaid one over the other, looked like a bowl of spaghetti in tracking the path. And none of the models predicted where the hurricane ultimately went. So every single model was wrong. And I'm thinking, if you can't predict the weather in 5 days using your modeling, then how is it even possible to kind of go into this and with any sort of certainty? And the stakes are so high. And the problem here is you have, on the one hand, you have the medical people whose sole job is to save lives. God bless them. And that's what they're there for. That's the Hippocratic Oath. Do whatever it takes to save this life. Then you have politicians whose sole job is to be seen to do the right thing or not do the wrong thing in this case, because you want to get elected. So you have the politicians, right? Then you have the economists whose job is to protect the economy at pretty much all cost and maybe assign a value to lives. And so you have these three competing interests, and then you inject the media. The media's job is to weave a narrative, is to tell a story, is to take every new set of facts and turn it into this compelling narrative that attracts your eyeballs, whether it's the print media, whether it's the television, whether it's the internet, podcasts, Instagram. And so everybody's competing to tell a more compelling, horrifying story. And so that engenders panic. So now you have all these different elements trying to figure out what the right solution is. And at the end of the day, it's almost de facto the wrong solution. So
yeah,
I don't know that we have an answer, but that's where we are as a society.
Yeah. It's what's funny. The media not only there to weave a narrative, but also to change the foundations of our worldview and actually manipulate our worldview to influence the way that we interpret outside stimulus in the narrative. I mean, Bernays wrote about this in the 1920s. Anybody who's looked into marketing has come upon Edward Bernays. And it's funny, his nephew actually was the founder of Netflix. So the people who do run the media, they understand concepts like things like social engineering and things like forming people's worldview and long-term approaches to stimulus and response training of the populace. And unfortunately, I think we get caught in the middle of a lot of this stuff and kind of in a very dangerous manipulative game of that really is playing on our fears and our deepest fear, our most primal fears about death, right? You're going to die if you don't do this. And this is the same way that the climate crisis narrative was being sold, right? Your house is on fire was what we were being told in 2019. I want you to act like your house is on fire. How dare you? We had Greta, who's, very, very scripted. These things that were being shown in media. This is not just, a lot of the times we think this is just the natural thing. Oh, this is what's happening in the world. You've been involved in television productions. You understand that when you're making a reality TV show or the news, it's not just the objective raw facts that you're looking at.
Oh, never. No, that's the problem is that, everything that's produced on television comes from a point of view. Everything that's produced, every documentary, right, that is supposed to be, originally the documentary was conceived as an objective look at a particular problem in life or a historical event that we go back and dissect and come up with real answers. No, it's written from a very subjective point of view and then crafted to drive that point of view home. So whether it's CNN or CNBC or Fox or whatever, every one of these news stations has not just they've got an agenda. I mean, the main agenda is they just want to sell ads. I mean, look, that's that's really what they want to do, and to whom they want to sell ads and how they create the narrative and how they create the story and who they choose as the villain because every story has a villain and every story has a hero. It's really interesting to see how humans then, because we are, by the way, we're storytellers by nature. That's what we do. If you look at everything we've done since we started language, however many hundreds of thousands of years ago, it's about storytelling. First, it was telling stories around the campfire and relating, not just the events of the day and and the danger that lurked over there, but maybe it was trying to describe what caused the rain and what caused the sun to come up. And then that became, the printed word with Gutenberg, and people started reading these same stories, and then it became radio and television and newspapers and podcasts and books and plays and movies and even video games. They're all stories, and so we're all living our lives based on wanting to be entertained in some way or another by a particular story. Instagram, it's stories. Facebook, stories. TikTok, stories. It's all stories, man. And it's crazy how, we still have this brain that was kind of wired with its original intent a couple of 100,000 years ago in terms of storytelling. And not much has changed since then. We're still like, oh my God, the big bad thing up in the sky that's going to come get us. That's the danger. We're very viscerally exposed to that on a daily basis.
Yeah, the invisible enemy narrative. It's a powerful one, right? I mean, we had the war on drugs that was obviously really successful. The war on terror, total complete success, and now the war on germs, viruses, who knows, genetic alleles. I mean, where this could be taken as far as mandatory testing for people. This sort of stuff. I think we do need to be looking at this. It is very alarming where this is all going, and we've got hours long conversations on this itself, and I'm sure me and you we could expand upon this. But we touched on a lot of this, a lot of very important subjects today, Mark, and I really appreciate you coming on. Really appreciate you opening up and talking about some of these subjects with the audience here. Let me hit on some of the. I got some super chats from the audience. You guys sent some generous donations, so I want to thank you guys. We got Doth4580 just sends £3 with a little bird with a thumb up. Thanks a lot for the support there. Location 515. There you go. We got a regular viewer. Location 515, always coming through with the nice, generous super chats. He sends $20. He says, God bless. Thank you so much, Location 515. Weston Jones sending $2.99. Got a question for Mark. How does regenerative agriculture become normal with population I guess he means population increase. How does regenerative agriculture become normal with population increase?
Well, there'll be a point at which the population does not increase. When we look at the history of mankind on Earth, and we see the graph and the increase in the population numbers, it's pretty alarming. But one thing that happens with an improvement in wealth around the world is people choose to have fewer kids. So there'll be a point at which, if we can allow the rest of the developing world to come to our, to kind of catch up with us in terms of growth and development, they'll have fewer children, and that will slow the population rate down. Some developed countries are actually experiencing a negative population growth right now. Japan, I think, is one of them, and that automatically comes with wealth, and it's we can go into the social and economic dynamics of that, but poorer countries historically, you might have 6, 7, 8, 9 kids in the poorer parts of the world, partly because that was your wealth, partly because you needed them to work the fields and participate in feeding the family. But as more and more wealth gets generated, the choice to have children decreases. So there'll be a point at which we hit a number. Some people have bandied about the number of like 9 billion or 10 billion. That's still a big number, but it's not double what it is today. Then if you look at all of the potential land around the world that is suitable for agriculture, suitable for growing grass, suitable for grazing ruminant beasts, it is a big number, and we haven't begun to scratch the surface of that resource and to actually tap into that. All you need to do is fly across the country in a plane in the United States and look out the window at how much land there is that's available, much of which isn't even arable. It's not, you can't grow crops on it, but you could certainly, grow bison and beef and whatever other beasts that you wanted to grow, and reclaim topsoil, and with that topsoil, grow vegetables. So the potential is certainly there to feed the world. And then I think, again, for me, one of the most compelling arguments in that regard of feeding the world is when I realized that I already ate. I wasn't a big eater, and I was already eating 35, 40% more calories than I needed. Imagine if everybody in this country ate 35 to 40% fewer calories, and that resource, that food was allocated to somebody else,
Yeah, I mean, even
and
all the
not
land that's
not
used to,
thrown away.
right, all the
Yeah,
soy, corn, wheat, all
yeah,
these pesticides that are used. I mean, this is what's creating environmental devastation. It's not regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture could actually help to support larger populations. And I would say, like a different way of looking at this is look at the failures of the model for global warming or so-called climate change. Look at the failures in modeling for hurricanes. Look at the failures in modeling for this current crisis with this virus. Right? These models are based on a few cherry-picked and selected inputs, right, modeled using algorithms written by fallible human beings to model much greater systems that are, systems within systems within systems interacting with other systems with infinite inputs that we don't understand and that we aren't even measuring. So I'd say it's even like maybe you should go and check out the basic assumption that the population is too much. Yeah, I'm sure you live in a place like New York or LA. You live in a place like Mumbai. It might seem like overpopulation's crazy, right? But if you took a drone and threw it straight up in the air right over where I live, and you took a look around panoramically, you're going to see that only about 5% of the visible landscape is being touched regularly by human beings. The most of the Andes is completely free of human beings. And I think the assumption that human beings are bad and that we need to keep our populations in check through management has resulted in and from faulty theoretical models and also been a justification for genocide and for horrible acts that have been done in an organized way in the name of science and sustainability. So I think we maybe should look even a little bit deeper than just the assumption that we're going to feed the world. It's like, are you feeding your own family? Are you feeding anybody? Or are you just consuming? So, I mean, me as a consumer, should I feel so like I'm so omnipotent and so knowledgeable that I get to decide how many other human beings there should be allowed to be on this planet? I don't know. I think that's a little bit. I think that's a slippery slope, and it's very dangerous. And I think we've been duped with the overpopulation thing as well. I think a lot of people would have their eyes open if they looked into some of the other ways of looking at these situations and these models. So thanks, Weston, for the super chat there. I appreciate that. And then we got another generous super chat, $10 from Turbo Bitch 06. Nice name. She says, thanks for doing this, Mark and Tristan. Been following you both for years. Christ is in our midst. Looking forward to watching the rest later. So it looks like you already took off. I appreciate the super chat, and I'm glad you enjoyed. And I've also been following Mark for years. And the channel here is called Primal Edge Health. And actually, when I made this channel, I didn't even know that I was kind of riding on the marketing niche that Mark had helped to open up and to create. So I think it's cool. It all comes full circle now. We got the Primal Blueprint up on Primal Edge Health, and thank you very much. Delbridge sends $10. He says, I read both Gary Toeb's book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, and Why We Get Fat. It seems weight gain is due to hormonal imbalance, especially estrogen dominance. What are your thoughts, Mark?
Well, it's certainly due to insulin dysregulation. We know that now. And Gary, he basically did the first real scientific deep dive, where all of the research had existed and no one had kind of brought it to the mainstream media, right? And Gary's looking at this like, wait a minute, we don't get fat because we overeat. We get fat because of a hormonal dysregulation that's caused by the types of foods we choose to eat. And if we can reaccess this insulin, glucagon, leptin, ghrelin kind of balance that we seek, the weight will fall off effortlessly. We'll maintain some normalized body composition, some ideal body composition. The estrogen dominance part of that, that's a nuanced element of that, and it's men and women are different in terms of the degree to which they burn fat, or the degree to which they make muscle, and then within maleness and femaleness, estrogen dominant or more males that have higher estrogen levels are going to have more female-like qualities in terms of building muscle or not building muscle, burning fat or not burning fat. That becomes a very nuanced discussion about, and we could, who knows, we could even talk about how much soy, do you have in your diet, and were you raised on a soy formula? And is that one of the reasons for this sort of estrogen dominance today? So I guess the short answer to the question is absolutely. There's a lot of hormonal issues that you look at, and that's when you deal with. I suspect, Tristan, when you're coaching people, that's one of the things you're gonna, that you would look at and say, well, let's play around with this a little bit and see what these manipulations here or there might do to address what might be a problem there.
For sure, yeah. So it's like, I mean, to say that, I think people strawman Gary a lot. I think he takes some flack from the calories in, calories out zealots, to use everybody's favorite zealot, Lane Norton's favorite word. These people will criticize Gary Tobes and say that Gary Tobes is denying calories, but I don't really think that's his message. I don't think he's saying calories don't matter. I think what he's saying is that the reason we're eating so much, right? And if he's not saying it, this is how I see it, right? The reason we're eating so much is very likely because of hormonal imbalance due to the foods we're eating. So your food choices affect your hormones, which affect your hunger. Right? So if you eat the wrong foods, you're going to be more hungry, eat more food. So yeah, calories matter, but to just tell someone, hey, stop eating so many calories, you're welcome. I mean, you're not going to really help them out very much at all there. So Del, really appreciate that. Laura Painter sends a $19.99 super generous super chat. It's a little, it's a nice one of those emoji things where they call them sticker things that they put out. So it says, thanks for being you. And I appreciate that, Laura Painter. Really appreciate the super chat. And everybody watching right now, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for hanging out. Mark Sisson, where can people find more of your work, sir? And where would you direct people to learn a little bit more about what you're doing? I know you've got a lot on your plate. You mentioned pivoting earlier, and maybe on a future episode we can talk about some of the ways people might be pivoting their economic models and their business models during these times as things become more clear. But where are you going with this? Where can people find your stuff, and how might you be pivoting in the near future?
Well, so Mark's Daily Apple is the blog, marksdailyapple.com. The Primal Blueprint is my seminal work. If you really want to understand what this is all about and the the science behind everything I talk about, the Primal Blueprint. It's a book. It's available on Amazon and everywhere, pretty much. Same with the Keto Reset Diet. If you want to learn more about the ketogenic diet and metabolic flexibility, the Keto Reset Diet or Keto for Life, the more recent one. I am on Instagram as Mark Sisson Primal. Not a lot of information there, just a bunch of naked shots of me, but whatever. I gotta revisit that at some point. Yeah, that's it. What's next? I'm looking for the next thing. I still am involved with Primal Kitchen. I sold it to Kraft Heinz a year and a half ago. I'm still very much involved in making sure that we have the finest products on the shelf. I suspect that'll keep going for quite some time. And I'm an angel investor in 10 small companies, and looking at what my next big venture might be, but don't have any idea what it is yet. So
we got a little farm here in Ecuador. We got 2 cows. We got like 10 sheep. Yeah, right on, man. Yeah. So hey, it's been great meeting you. Very inspired by what you do. And guys, check it out, the Primal Blueprint. And of course, you still do stuff with Mark's Daily Apple. It was a great forum, especially over the last 10 years. Real good resources there. How much are you involved with that now?
Yeah, no. I'm Mark's Daily Apple. I'm involved in that every day. Yeah. And I've if you sign up for the newsletter, I have some sort of unique things that get sent out to the group once or twice a week. I have a thing called Sundays with Sisson, which has more of my philosophical bent in it and less scientific. But very much involved.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks a lot, Mark. Really appreciate it. See you guys next time. We got some more good streams to come, and really appreciate all you guys watching. You can find more at primaledgehealth.com. If you're watching on YouTube right now, we'll have the audio version up very soon. And thanks for hanging out, guys. Bye-bye.